I am totally committed to finding the perfect house for you, and I don't care how long it takes. Because at Evers and Evers, we want you to be happy for Evers and Evers.
Let's talk about Disney's Haunted Mansion. It sucks. And I just don't mean it sucks. I mean, it really sucks. Like, this is the closest thing to a universal fact you can get in the film world. A 13% score on Rotten Tomatoes and a 30% audience score? That's bad. And it's not very hard to see why. Eddie Murphy is a funny guy, but this film is not a good showcase. The acting is all over the map. The special effects boomerang between amazing practical shots and Ghostbusters 2016-worthy CGI diarrhea. And overall, the tone was just... I mean, what was the tone? Is this a screwball comedy, a scary movie, a kid's film? All I know is I was just in it for Terrence Stamp. In the end, one of the few things it managed to get right was a bunch of references to the Disney ride. So many references. However, the fan-servicey nature of the film all but guaranteed a decent narrative was gonna take backseat to, oh, did you see the thing? We did the thing! Visit Disneyland, kids! Contrast that with Pirates of the Caribbean, where references were more like a pinch of salt to season an already good story, and you can see why this film doesn't get a lot of lovin'. But did it have to be this way? Could Disney have crafted something as savvy as Pirates in 2003? Sure, because they did it with Pirates, like it was the same year. But how? And what would it look like? Well, hold on to all loose articles and keep your hands inside the moving vehicle at all times, because this is Disney's The Haunted Mansion reimagined. Now, I know this might sound sacrilegious, but I actually wouldn't set the film in the classic Disney Haunted Mansion. I think the template should be Pirates of the Caribbean. And nobody sits here and says, oh my god, they didn't reference every single animatronic from the Pirates ride. If you think outside the box, then you've already prepped the audience for a different experience. So where are we going? France. Euro Disney to be exact. Did you know that they have their own version of Disney's Haunted Mansion? It's called Phantom Manor, and to be honest, it's kinda badass. It's darker, spookier, set in the Wild West, has a Norman Bates vibe to the house, and shares its origin story with Big Thunder Mountain. So, yeah, the audience would essentially be getting 2 Disney ride movies in one. Now, if you don't know anything about this amazing ride, here's a quick summary. In the 1800s, Henry Ravenswood struck gold in Big Thunder Mountain and founded a neighboring town. He built a Victorian manor overlooking the mountain where he lived with his wife and daughter Melanie. The natives warned that if he kept digging it would anger the Thunderbird, and a terrible catastrophe would ensue. Meanwhile, Melanie was courted by several suitors, but Henry didn't approve, and they all vanished under mysterious circumstances. But a final suitor, a trained engineer named Jake, caught Melanie's eye. Fortunately for Jake, Henry and his wife were killed in an earthquake, just as the natives foretold. Flash forward to Melanie's wedding day and a mysterious phantom appears in the house. Was it the ghost of her father? Nobody knows. But as Melanie donned her wedding dress, the phantom lured Jake to the attic and hung him from the rafters. In the ballroom, the bride sat alone. Hours went by with no sign of the groom. Guests filed slowly away, leaving Melanie alone in the house with the staff of maids and butlers. Someday, she told herself, he will come. And so, having never taken off her wedding dress, she waits for his return, wandering aimlessly and singing melancholy songs of lost love for all eternity. But the phantom lives on too, forever laughing at Melanie's devotion to her unintended. A dark curse fell upon the house, and no one ever set foot inside again. As for the town, the quake slashed a line through the city, swallowing much of the buildings and its residents whole. The area became known as Phantom Canyon, and anyone who ventured in there never came back. But on some nights when the moon is full, locals swear they can still hear the songs of the lonely bride, the maniacal laughter of the phantom, and the revelry of party guests. Now tell me that isn't amazing. A tale of love and death doomed to repeat itself in the shadow of a cursed mountain. So, now that we've got the source material, let's look at the cast. Okay, so it's no great secret that Eddie Murphy just wasn't cut out for this film. He's too goofy, and we need to dial it back a bit. So who do we go with? Personally, I think he needs to be a con artist, a sort of Peter Venkman type. And don't give him a family, that comes later. If this sounds familiar, that's because I'm basing him on Professor Emilius Brown, one of my favorite Disney characters of all time. And if you haven't seen Bedknobs and Broomsticks, I'd check it out. He's a louse and a con who doesn't even believe in the magic he's peddling until he finds out it's real. Then he redeems himself. So we need this character to be a smooth talker, a schmoozer, a sly son of a bitch. That's why I'd go with Hitch himself, Will Smith. Given his history, particularly in the Men in Black films, I think he'd be the perfect snarky skeptic turned true believer. Now, I'd have him working for a shady real estate boss. Thuggish, but not an Italian stereotype per se. I'm thinking Michael Keaton. With Homecoming and Batman, he's shown that he can pull off intimidating. Plus, it's not exactly like he was busy in 2003. For the Phantom, I'm thinking it has to be someone older, someone with a particular voice and a decent laugh. Willem Dafoe, Hugo Weaving, and Christopher Lee would all be good. They'd also be busy. So I'm thinking Jeremy Irons. Just, on a tighter leash than something like Dungeons & Dragons. As for the staff, they can all go. I'd settle on one caretaker and one caretaker only, direct from the classic ride. Judging by the character models and taking into account its Southwest setting, I'd go with Tim Blake Nelson. Sorry, Terrence, I still love you, man, but it just won't work for this. To replace Madame Leota, I'd add a local librarian character of Native American descent who has knowledge of the town's sordid history. I'm thinking of someone like Tantu Cardinal. That leaves the female protagonist and the two kids. The kids, well, that's central casting's call. The female lead, I have no one in particular, but I could see anyone from Thandie Newton, Vivica A. Fox, Vanessa Williams, or hell, Jada Pinkett Smith. But to make my editor's life easier, we'll just use images of Marsha Thomason from the original. As for the ghostly bride and her missing lover, I don't know, Josh Hartnett and Kate Beckinsale. It's a mostly silent role, so I don't really care. Just pick someone who was around at the time. Okay, so now we have a setting and a cast. That just leaves... So we open in the Haunted Mansion in the late 1800s. It's the classic Disney ride scene. Ballroom dancers swirl about in costumes as a bride overlooks the party from the balcony. An elderly woman narrates, telling the story of Melanie Ravenswood, who is to wed a lowly train engineer on Halloween night, much to the chagrin of her father. Her father, Henry, grew rich on the coal deposits in Big Thunder Mountain, despite the Native American warnings about the land being haunted by the Thunderbird. But something has gone wrong this night. The groom never shows. Slowly, the guests start to leave. Then a giant earthquake ravages the house, and a phantom dressed as the Red Death materializes on the balcony. He cackles insanely and curses the bride, saying she will never find happiness. The house and its land belongs to him. We flash forward to an old Native American woman, Leota. She finishes her story in a small-town library. The children disperse outside. We see the town now, destitute and all but abandoned. The woman stares up at the haunted mansion, framed by Big Thunder Mountain in the distance. From the veranda, a creepy-looking caretaker stares down at her. They exchange an uncomfortable glance. Leota's grandson approaches.
Grandma, do you believe in the curse?
Oh, yes.
You think it'll ever be lifted?
It would take a very special someone.
Like a hero?
Oh, this land has seen plenty of so-called heroes. I don't put much stock in them. No. It would take a coyote. A trickster. Someone as cunning as the things that stalk that house.
Cut to Jim Evers, played by Will Smith. He's doing a final walkthrough of a dilapidated house, trying to con a skittish buyer into closing a sale. After a lot of smooth talking and a little help from a shady inspector, the buyer agrees. We then see Evers exchanging cash with the inspector, Freddie, who I'd peg as a John Ratzenberger type. Freddie thanks him for his donation and asks him what he's going to do with the commission. Evers tells him to call up his boss, Paulie, and place a bet on a horse, Diamondback. It's a sure deal. Freddie can't believe it.
You serious? After all that work? I'll tell you, that's your Achilles heel, Jim. You're always looking for the next big thing.
Evers is then summoned back to work by Paulie, played by Michael Keaton. Turns out Paulie is in the racketeering business and real estate is one of his major games. Jim meets him in his office. Paulie is seated at a desk, surrounded by goons.
Yeah, good job on that Oakland deal. Look, I got another one for you. Old place, some ghost town out in Arizona. Won it off a friend. Got a bit of a pass, but I think you can smooth talk your way into a sale.
Oh no, see, I got this investment that's about to pay off.
Oh yeah, something about a horse?
Not just any horse, Diamondback. Trust me, this one's gonna be...
Jim stares at a horse race playing on a TV in the background. We see the rider fall off at the start. The other horses zoom past. Jim freezes and grimaces. We keep cutting back to the TV. At one point, the rider is pulling the horse by the reins. Finally, the rider tries pushing the horse across the finish line.
Great. So about that job.
We cut to Flagstaff Airport, where Jim Evers has one of those cute meets with Sarah and her two kids, Michael and Megan. On the long car ride up to Monument Valley, they talk. She's sitting on a fortune and looking for a large place to open up a bed and breakfast. She wants some place away from the bustle of the city. Jim raises an eyebrow at the mention of fortune and asks if there's a Mr. somebody in her life. The kids exchange annoyed glances. They clearly don't trust him. She says she got out of a rocky divorce and is looking to restart her life. When they arrive at Thunder Mesa, the townsfolk keep their distance. The family asks for directions from Leota, and she warns them that the house is cursed. Jim keeps trying to cut her off before she wrecks his sail. Eventually, they find the mansion, an old Victorian manor on the top of a hill. At the gate, they meet the caretaker, Clyde, played by Tim Blake Nelson. He trusts them about as much as the townsfolk.
Listen, my boss runs this place now. You let us in or it's gonna get uglier than your face.
You think you can break into this place? You think you can break out? It's impossible. Of course there's always my way.
And what's that?
Well, through the gate.
Yeah, are we done here, Cletus? Or do I have to reach through these bars and shove your head through the keyhole?
Clyde opens the gate and lets them in. Upon exploring, Sarah's impressed at the fancy decor and space, but underwhelmed at the refurbishing she'd have to do. As Jim and Sarah discuss the place, Megan wanders off. She enters a room and stares at a mirror. Her reflection slowly distorts into a bride. At first she's beautiful, then she morphs into a skeleton and reaches through the mirror, shouting, "Wheezy!" She screams and runs downstairs. She tries to explain to her mother what happened, but Jim sloughs it off as kids being kids. Sarah threatens to leave, but Jim suggests they sleep on it. Literally.
I'll prove to you there's no ghosts, no curses, no my way. I'll stay here overnight. We all will. What do you say, Sarah? You wanted this to be a bed and breakfast. What better way to test it out?
Sarah reluctantly agrees. Jim shouts to Clyde,
"Hey, Deliverance! Fluff up the pillows. We're crashing here."
Your funeral.
As the family sets up, Clyde enters the bride's room and sees a reflection wandering through the mirror, candle in hand.
I know what you're doing, and it won't do you no good. You'll be lucky if they make it past midnight.
That night, a roaring thunderstorm moves in, and each character experiences something supernatural. Michael dreams of walking down a mine shaft following two specters. He hears a scream which morphs into a train whistle. He turns and finds the Big Thunder Mountain Railroad train barreling towards him. He screams and wakes up in a cold sweat. Megan, meanwhile, hears a woman crying and follows it through the halls. She sees a bride carrying candles wandering from room to room. Eventually, Megan stumbles across the ballroom. There, the room is filled with swirling spectral dancers, all but ignoring a ghostly bride crying to herself. Then the Phantom, dressed as the Red Death, appears up above and cackles. Megan screams and runs. Sarah, meanwhile, watches as the bedroom door locks itself from the outside. She bangs on the door and it unlocks. But when she flings the door open, she sees the Phantom staring her in the face. She screams and slams the door shut. The door knocks again. She opens it slowly. Nothing there. Then she stares down. Her kids tackle her, scared. Jim comes up and tries to explain it away. He says he'll stand guard downstairs in the parlor. As Jim helps himself to some old liquor, the front door knocks. It's a gentleman dressed in odd 19th century clothing and wearing what seems like Halloween makeup. Fans would instantly recognize him as the Hatbox Ghost. He says he was on his way to a Halloween gala when his ride crashed. He begs Jim to let him in from the storm. Jim takes pity and pours him a drink. As they talk, it's clear that something's off. The man is agitated. He asks where all the guests are. Then he claims it's Halloween night and he's late to a costume party at this very house. But Jim says Halloween isn't for another day. Suddenly, Sarah and the kids come in. Michael asks him,
"Mr. Evers? Who are you talking to?"
What do you mean? This guy right?
Jim turns and the man is gone. Stunned, he stares at the hat box. Slowly, he opens it. Inside is Jim's head. It stares up at him and says,
"Trick or treat."
Jim screams like a girl and bolts for the door. The family stops him and asks what's wrong.
What's wrong? Didn't you see?
He turns around and the hat box is gone. Cut to Jim dragging the family out.
We are getting the hell out of here.
Jim drives the family away through the storm. Unfortunately, the bridge is out. They try various homes in town but keep getting doors slammed in their face. Finally, Leota takes them in, but only for the night. She fills them in on the curse. Some say it's the wrath of the Thunderbird. Some say it's the Phantom. Either way, the answers lie somewhere deep beneath the house, perhaps in the mountain itself. When Jim asks if it's possible to uncover this mystery, she replies,
Not so long as the caretaker is there.
Dawn arrives. It's now Halloween Day, and the kids are at the library looking up town history. They find out that the bride's father, Henry, disappeared the same night as the wedding. And furthermore, the earthquake that struck that night swallowed half the town. They also found out that Melanie's previous 4 suitors disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Meanwhile, at the house, Sarah and Jim confront Clyde, but he claims he's innocent. The two decide to follow him around. Eventually, they find out there's a secret passage in Sarah's bedroom. It leads to a back room where there's an old skull mask and a red cape and top hat. Included is a map of the house, complete with secret passageways.
That's how he's doing it. It's a con. He's been scaring us the whole time.
They leave, and the camera slowly pans to the shadows, where a skeleton lies crumpled in the corner, unseen. Downstairs, they confront Clyde again and order him out. He leaves, but not without a warning.
You think you're rid of me? No one ever truly leaves this place.
After he leaves, Sarah and Jim share a moment together. She admits it was kind of fun to solve a mystery. They get dangerously close to kissing when there's a snap. They look up and jump for cover. The chandelier crashes between them. Sarah then admits she's not sure about this. This house would eat up every last cent she has. Jim says he thought she was rich. She admits she inherited the money from her father, who died tragically in a car accident. Her fortune, though, is small. Jim has second thoughts. He steps outside and stares into the setting sun. He calls Paulie. Jim explains that he can't go through with it. Most of the people he scams are pretty scummy themselves, but Sarah's an innocent. Paulie has none of it. He explains that he already booked a vacation for his wife with the expected money, and if his wife gets upset, the dog gets upset. And if the dog gets upset, the kids get upset. And if the kids get upset, the cat gets upset. Jim interrupts.
Which ate the mouse that lived in the house that Paulie built. What is the point?
The point is, I get upset.
See, now that's important. You should have led with that.
You know what happened to the last person that upset me?
I don't know.
I don't either. Nobody's seen him again.
Well, I'm sure he's fine.
I'm not. Get it done, Evers.
As he hangs up, Jim whispers to himself.
Man, I gotta tell her.
Suddenly a chill runs up his spine. He slowly turns. The kids are there, back from the library. They heard everything. Before he can stop them, they run to their mother. Jim tries to explain, but Sarah is both furious and crushed. She says that after the bridge is fixed by tomorrow, she's out of here. In the meantime, Jim can sleep in the parlor, and all the doors will be locked. Alright, so final act. What goes down? Well, there's a break-in, but we don't know who yet. Maybe the caretaker? Megan finds the bride and befriends her. It turns out Melanie's not so bad. She's just been driven mad by her search for the groom. Melanie tells Megan that whenever she feels like she's close to finding her love, the Phantom chases her away, forcing her to go in perpetual circles. Back upstairs, Michael dreams he's on a runaway mine train, which dead ends at an underground well. He looks in and sees a golden light. Suddenly, the well becomes an eye staring back at him. In the Phantom's voice, it says,
I see you.
The Phantom reaches out for him from below. He screams and wakes up. Meanwhile, Sarah wakes up and hears someone calling for help. It sounds like Jim. She follows the sound down the halls into the dark. Unbeknownst to her, Jim is getting drunk in the parlor, moping about how he had a good thing and ruined it. In a flash, all hell breaks loose. The house goes nuts. And this is where you can throw in whatever Easter eggs from the attraction you want. Maybe even the singing bus. Get wild in an Evil Dead 2 Deerhead sort of way. The haunting builds and builds and builds until Sarah screams in the distance. The house stops and the kids bus in. They say their mom is gone. Jim and the kids search all the secret passages, worried sick. She's nowhere. Jim whips out the blueprint of the house. He spots an odd hallway in the basement.
That's it. This basement hallway is useless, just dead ends. There's gotta be a secret door here, even if it isn't on the map.
How do you know?
Gotta know the criminal mind, kid.
The kids exchange glances. They step away. Jim stoops down.
All right, listen. I know you don't trust me. I'm the one that got y'all into this mess, but your mom's out there, and I'm gonna do whatever it takes to bring her back.
Yeah, 'cause she's your meal ticket.
All right, look. See this? This is the contract I brought. Now, it's just waiting for your mom's signature.
Jim rips it in half.
I don't care about all that anymore. I care about you two, and I care about Sarah. So I need you to be brave. 'Cause if that's what it's like up here, damn, I can only imagine what it's gonna be like down there.
The kids agree and they find the secret passage in the basement. Megan leaves the trapdoor opened.
For a friend,
she says. We see the bride approaching the entrance in the shadows, curious. It seems like she's never been down this way before. The passageway leads to an old mine shaft. Along the way, they're confronted by Clyde, who tries to stop Jim with a shovel.
You shouldn't have come here.
Man, what is your deal?
Jim fends him off and seemingly knocks him out. Further down, they find Sarah in front of the Big Thunder Mountain mine train. The fires inside the boiler seem magically lit. She explains she was following this voice that led her here. She thought it was Jim, but was mistaken. Jim can't hear it, neither can Michael, but Megan can. It's coming from deep inside the mine. Melanie then materializes and says,
"It's him! I know it! It's him!"
Jim asks, "Who the hell is this?" and Megan fills them in. Then they hear a crazed laugh echoing from the dark behind them. Jim says it's gotta be Clyde, but Sarah disagrees.
Oh, I think you're right.
Melanie turns around and begs them to run before vanishing. The group hops aboard the train and starts it up. What follows is a mine train chase with the Phantom close behind. Again, very Sleepy Hollow meets Temple of Doom. Eventually, they see a pile of rocks blocking the path and hit the brakes just in time. They hop off.
I think we gave him the slip.
They wander through the ruins of an underground town. Skeletons line the remains of a street. Some lie in half-open coffins, the remains of a sunken graveyard. The kids explain that the town was swallowed up in a great earthquake, the night Melanie's father disappeared and the Phantom first showed. Eventually, they reach a deep, natural well where Sarah and Megan say they can hear a voice. Michael explains that this is the well he saw in his dream. Just then, Clyde shows up for one last round. He warns them to get back from the well. In the tussle, Jim goes over into the well. The caretaker looks shocked.
what did you do?
I was only trying to protect you.
Protect us? From what?
Suddenly, the skeletons from the town come to life and start marching towards them. As the zombie skeletons draw closer, we cut to Jim in the well. It's dark, but the water shimmers in gold. He turns and sees a skeleton. He screams. Jim closes his eyes as the skeleton reaches out and touches his shoulder. There's a bright white flash. We see everything now through Jim's visions. Jake, a young train engineer falling in love with Melanie. A disapproving father. Jake discovering gold at the bottom of the well. Him telling Henry Ravenswood about the discovery on the wedding night. Henry dressed for the Halloween wedding ball as the Phantom. The two riding down to the well. And then, Henry pushing him in. Jake looking up, seeing the image of the Red Death looming over him. The cries for help. The sounds of the other miners approaching. Henry sneaking around the Good Samaritans. Finding a case of dynamite. Lighting it. Then running. An explosion. Then a massive earthquake. The town comes crumbling down, and Jake is forever sealed. When Jim opens his eyes, he sees the engineer as he once was. Friendly, smiling softly. Up above, the family and the caretaker are huddled together as the skeletons close in. The bony fingers touch their shoulders, but when they open their eyes, they see just ordinary miners, albeit translucent. Jim calls for a rope, which Clyde throws down. Jim climbs up with the spirit of Jake floating next to him. Melanie's ghost emerges from the shadows. They embrace and ask how this is all possible. It's then that Jim, with some help from Sarah and the kids, explains what went down. It turns out that Henry Ravenswood had taken out Melanie's other suitors, but Jake presented a challenge. So when Jake showed Henry the gold, he saw an opportunity. Kill two birds with one stone. Because the gold vein lay just outside of Henry's claim, Jake had the right of discovery, and he was even willing to go 50-50 on it as a show of good faith to his would-be father-in-law. But Henry had other plans. With Henry's attempted murder on the verge of being discovered by other miners, he used dynamite to create an unfortunate accident. No witnesses. Unfortunately, this created an earthquake which swallowed the town. Mortally wounded in the collapse, Henry returned to the wedding ball in costume, then cursed the crowd and slid back into the shadows. He returned to his secret room where he removed his costume and collapsed into the corner, bleeding to death. The engineer's screams would go unheard, and the bride would forever wonder what happened on that stormy night. And the Phantom, ever vengeful, made sure no one could have what he had lost. Just then, the Phantom materializes and grabs the kids, dangling them over the edge. For the first time, we see his face revealed. It's Henry, Melanie's father. He cackles and rants about how they'll never be able to steal from him. Sarah begs him to let the kids go.
They are precious to you. Well, now you know my pain. Wandering the secret passages every night, ever watchful, ever fearful of those who would take her from me. Take what is rightfully mine. This land, its treasures, my property.
Clyde then steps through the ghostly miners.
You said it was the bride I should fear. You told my family for generations that there were dark forces in the deep that only we could keep at bay. You lied to us. You lied to me. And you lied to them.
The ghostly miners close in. One of them whistles with his fingers. A train whistle echoes in the distance.
Looks like your train's just arrived.
The Phantom turns, distracted. Jim and Sarah jump for the kids and roll away. Through the tunnel, a spectral funeral train emerges, covered in skeletons. The Phantom screams in agony as he vanishes into the cars. In the caboose, we see the Phantom banging against a ghostly window through the back door. A skeletal conductor lies on the railing and tips his hat to the crowd. The train vanishes.
Poor fool.
I don't get it. He was already rich beyond his dreams.
Some people are always looking for the next big thing.
And how about you?
I already found it.
They embrace and walk up the tunnel, bride, engineer, and miners in tow. As the family emerges from the house, Leota approaches. Jim addresses her.
You know, I get it now. There was no Thunderbird, no curse. It was gold. Your people knew if those miners found gold, the entire country would flood here. That mountain would be torn apart even worse than it already was. Things would never be the same.
Sure. Either way, the curse has been lifted, and I've got dinner cooking.
She walks away.
Okay then. You're welcome.
Melanie and Jake materialize with the miners. They explain that it's time for their spirits to move on. Sarah says it's a shame that they won't get to spend time together in their own house. Melanie says it doesn't really matter. Even if Sarah doesn't take it, the house will be sold eventually. Jim interrupts.
Wait, I have an idea. Something that can work out for all of us.
Cut to Paulie outside his building. A car drives up. It's Jim. He tosses Paulie a satchel of cash. Paulie is incredulous as Jim revs up the engine.
And where do you think you're going?
You know what they say. Go west, young man.
He peels out. A title card reads 6 months later. A sign outside the mansion reads, The Haunted Mansion Dead and Breakfast. Inside, the new hotel is brimming with life. Customers come in and out. The town has seen an economic boom. Jim and Sarah are happily married. The kids run down the hallway with other ghost children as the caretaker warns them not to run. Melanie and Jake spook a guest in the bedroom, then laugh together as he runs out. At the front desk, Jim is handling a customer checking out early. The customer says the special effects at this place are amazing, but too scary for him. Jim says,
"Aw, thanks, man." No refunds.
Finally, Jim's shady inspector friend, Freddie, walks in.
I gotta hand it to you, Jim. This is your best con yet.
That's the thing, Freddie. It's all legit.
Ah, come off it. How'd you pull this off?
If he told you, he'd have to kill you.
And then you'd be working for me.
As we pull out of the house, we see more cars lining up to stay at the attraction. The sounds of laughter are punctuated by a scream. One last time, Jim shouts,
"No refunds!"
Finally, in a mid-credits roll, we see Freddie driving away at dusk. He passes the classic ghostly hitchhikers from the Disney ride. He looks back, and they're gone. He shakes his head, disbelieving. Nah. Then he scans the rearview mirror. They're in the back seat. Cut to black. Freddie screams. Ah! And there it is. All's well that ends well. It's darker, scarier, but also goofy when it needs to be. We're not talking high art here, it's a Disney movie. But it's got nods to both the Disneyland and Euro Disney versions of the rides, plus a ridiculously high body count. I'd say it's a hard PG, hell, maybe even a soft PG-13. And while it would definitely spook the kids, I think the happy Beetlejuice-style ending, where they learn to live with the ghosts, would close it out on a fun note. Maybe you think this would be a better version. Maybe not. Maybe you've got your own ideas. Let us know in the comments. And if you like what you hear, also check out the podcast. And remember, have a happy Halloween.